I think that'll work. Let's find out. Shall we? Shall we? Yes, we shall. All right. Probably ought to, yep, it's already on. There we go. So, we're going to spend just a little bit of time kind of meandering through the questions that I gave you yesterday. It would behoove you to jot some things down as we go through this, particularly if you did not jot anything down last night. Can I give you some advice? You ready for my advice? When the man gives you questions to answer that you know are going to be on your test, you probably ought to answer them. Because I'm just mean, rotten, and nasty enough to stop doing that. All right. So let's go through this. And what I've done is I've created bullet points because I think it's just easier for us to look at it on the board rather than looking at a big old paragraph. So number one, what was the county unit system and how did it violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment? What Supreme Court decision ruled that it was illegal? And what did Justice Douglas mean when he said or when he wrote, the conception of political equality can mean only one thing, one person, one vote. So really that's kind of a two-part question. And this is how I would answer it. This is the information that I would include in my answer. I would describe what the county unit system was, a system of electing officials where each county received 2 unit votes per member of the House. So if you had one member in the House, how many unit votes did you get? 2. Pretty simple, right? So in Georgia, and we went through this is actually all in your notes, the most that a county could have was 6 unit votes. That would mean they had how many people in the House? 3. So there were 8 counties with 6 unit votes, and that gave us a total of 48 votes from those 6 counties, right? Or from those 8 counties. And then we have what I'm calling the middle. And what is this based on? Population, right? All right. So the middle had 4 unit votes. That'd be 30 counties. That'd be how many unit votes? 120. Add those 2 together. What do you get? 168. Keep that in mind. 168. And then you had the lower counties, or the counties with lower populations. They got 2 unit votes. But how many were there? 121. So that's a total of 242 votes. So if I'm running for governor, who ran for governor in here? Who was my 2 governor? Ethan and Drudy?
Yeah, and he died also.
Yeah, Drudy wins, but she's actually impeached because of some, but she didn't like fried chicken, so they impeached her. He died of a broken heart on a park bench. Yeah, got it. So y'all do listen to me. So again, Drudy in our example ran really hard in the counties that were least populated, in farming communities. And as a result, she won all 121 counties and became the governor. That's all you had to do. It's that simple. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Right? You got your homework? Okay. Yes. That's what I'd like to hear. I heard no way too often today. So here's what would happen. Here's where we can see the inequality that existed. The 38 largest counties in Georgia had 2/3 of the registered voters. But the 121 small counties could decide an election all by themselves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 of us in here. Right? I'll take myself out. So there's 10 of you. A third of you under the county unit system could decide what the rest of this class were going to do. If we were to use that kind of system. A third of you. The rest of you, your vote really doesn't count. And that's what happened under the county unit system. Urban counties like Fulton or Richmond County, Effingham County, their votes did not matter. We did it in first period, I think. Fulton County had how many? Well, we'll just say 500,000 voters. Early County, well, those three counties that we looked at, remember that? I think Glasscock was one of them. Quitman was one, maybe. Okay. So we had 500,000 to 4,000. That's population. So the ratio is 125 to 1. What does that mean? That means that 125,000 or 125 votes in Fulton County would equal 1 vote in those three counties. Does that make sense? Or if you want to look at it the other way, 1 vote here has the same power as 125 right there. Is that fair? Not at all. And so what the county unit system is trying to do is take away the urban vote. Why? Who lives in the urban areas? 2 groups of people. What? Come on, folks. Who do white Georgians not want to vote? Where do they live for the most part? In the urban areas. White Republicans are going to be found in the urban areas, the few that are in Georgia. And so this is aimed at taking the vote away from the black people of Georgia. Okay? That, by and large, that's its purpose. And it does a good job of it. Again, in a statewide election, if you can win the small counties, you can win the election. Gray versus Sanders, or Gray v. Sanders, that's the second part of this question, ruled that the American concept of political equality could only mean 1 person, 1 vote. That's what it's supposed to be, right? Instead of a third of you deciding what we're going to do, all 10 of you would have the opportunity to vote. And your votes would be what? Equal. Okay? Now, do y'all want to take your test tomorrow? Let's vote on that. Raise your hand if you don't want to. Okay, that is a clear majority, but you know what? This is not a democracy. This is a dictatorship. Okay? But your votes all counted. I noticed them. They just don't count as much as mine. That's kind of what the county unit system. You had small minority that you broke your desk. Actually, if you look under your chair, you can see the, how about putting that back together? Just slides on there. There you go. Okay. So again, under the county unit system, 1 group of people's votes counts more than another people. Gray versus Sanders ruled that no, that's not what elections are supposed to be about. That is not what government or how government is intended to operate. And so 1 person, 1 vote. And what does that mean? Exactly what it says. One person's or each person's vote should equal every other person's vote, regardless of their race, their gender, their locale, their sexual preference, any adjective you want to throw out there, or any characteristic you want to throw out there. So that's kind of what I'll be looking for. Okay. An explanation of the county unit system. How did it violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment? And basically it disenfranchised black voters and Republican voters. And then Gray v. Sanders. You know, what does that whole idea of one person, one vote mean? Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns about this particular question? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. All three of them are pretty straightforward, actually. All right. So, number 2, what were Jim Crow laws and why were they legal in Georgia and other southern states? What role did Plessy v. Ferguson have in helping to create Jim Crow laws, and how did Brown v. the Board of Education effectively end them? So, 2 questions. What were Jim Crow laws, and why were they legal in Georgia and other southern states? And you're going to notice something when I put my answer up here in just a minute. One of my answers. Jim Crow laws were laws passed by states to ensure that the races were segregated, but they were more than that. They also were meant to ensure that black folks would not be able to vote, would not be able to exercise their civil rights. And I didn't put that in here, but you probably should make note of that. So it's to ensure segregation, but it's also to ensure or to oppress black citizens by taking away their civil rights, primarily their right to vote. So it disenfranchises. Jim Crow laws are meant to disenfranchise. And they're also meant to make black people feel superior or inferior. Inferior. And it did a pretty good job of doing that. So laws passed by the states to ensure segregation, but also to strip away civil rights of black folks. Now, how did they do that? The poll tax. Remember that? Can't vote unless you pay the tax. The literacy test. Can't vote unless you can pass the test. And one I didn't talk about, but the property test. What do you think that would be? You can vote only if you own property. Good. So, what else we got? Why were they legal in Georgia and other southern states? They were legal in Georgia and other states. What word did I leave out? Look at the question. Huh? I left out southern. Why? It's it was on purpose. Why? But because there were Jim Crow laws in all states. Not necessarily aimed at black people, but there were still Jim Crow laws. In California, you would have Jim Crow laws that would be aimed at Mexicans. Maybe in Seattle, you would have Jim Crow laws aimed at Asians. Okay? But they were legal in Georgia and these other states because the SCOTUS, or the Supreme Court of the United States, declared that separate but equal was the law of the land in Plessy v. Ferguson. So not only is it allowed, it's the law. Things have to be separate but equal. And so that's the big thing that Plessy v. Ferguson does. What role does it play in helping to create Jim Crow laws, or what role did Plessy v. Ferguson have in helping to create Jim Crow laws, and how did Brown v. the Board of Education effectively end them? It paved the way for the races to be segregated for the establishment of these Jim Crow laws by creating the policy of separate but equal. That became the law. Again, that becomes the law. Separate but equal. It upholds the Louisiana Separate Rail Car Act of 1890. And it reinforced the idea that it is the states that determine whether or not the races could mingle. I like that word, mingle. Let's go mingle. I use the word schmoozing a lot because I'm really good at it. That's just talking to people. But, people could live together. And you know what I mean by live together. Not necessarily physically in the same house, but they could go to the same restaurants. They could go to the same movie theaters. They could go to the same schools. The state, each state gets to make that decision under Plessy v. Ferguson, under the separate but equal law that is handed down in Plessy v. Ferguson. Probably the best example of why that was possible is Loving versus Virginia. And I've talked about that before, where a couple are married in Nevada, in Las Vegas. Every girl's dream, right? Carly's sitting there thinking about her wedding day in Las Vegas, being married by an Elvis impersonator. Every girl's dream, right? I think when I retire, I'm going to move to Nevada and I'm going to become a chaplain in a wedding chapel. I'm ordained. I can do it. Yeah. Oh, wedding chaplain. I'll marry people all day long. Call me Mary and Sam. No, that is not what I'm doing. But Loving versus Virginia, couples married in Las Vegas, in Nevada, their marriage is legal, but they moved to Virginia. Virginia has Jim Crow laws in place that state, much like the one we saw in Georgia, that white people could only marry white people. Well, the Lovings, he's white, she's black. And so is their marriage legal in Virginia? No. So they sue, and they win. And it made their marriage legal in Virginia. And also, it kind of struck down some similar laws in other states. Why could they be married in Nevada and not in Virginia? Because the states decided. It's like my driver's license. Actually, I have 2 licenses here. One's my fake ID so I can get into bars. No. One is my driver's license. Where can I go with this and drive a vehicle? Anywhere. Literally anywhere in the world. Okay? This is my concealed carry permit. Where can I carry my pistol? I can carry it in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Florida and Tennessee and Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina. I can't carry it in Virginia. But states have what are called reciprocity laws. You recognize ours, we'll recognize yours. My oldest son, Joel, is a professional engineer. And that means he took this really long 8-hour test and passed it and was named a professional engineer. He took it in Virginia. And he took it in Virginia because in Georgia, he would have had to have worked for 7 years as an engineer. In Virginia, he only had to work, I think it was 6. And Georgia would recognize his license from the state of Virginia. So there was reciprocity. States didn't always do that. One of the reasons that they do is because of what happens with this, the Brown versus the Board of Education case. Ends Jim Crow laws. Basically by saying that separate but equal is inherently unequal. It's never fair. It never has been fair. It never will be fair. It never will be equal. And I'm not, when we talk about equal, we're not necessarily talking about fair. Y'all do realize that, right? I mean, do women have equal rights, the same rights as men? Why are y'all shaking your head? No. Yeah, I mean, you can do anything you want to. Anything a man, you can do anything that I can do, as long as it's legal, right? When you're of age, you can drive a car, you can do whatever you want to do, as long as it's legal. Is that right? Is that fair? Yeah, okay. Jacob and Logan and Ethan and John and William, when you turn 18 years old, you are required by federal law to register for what is called selective service. You are bound by law to register for the draft. Now, we haven't had a draft since 1972, but you are still required. When I turned 18, I had to go down to the courthouse and register for selective service. It's a lot easier to do this day. You know what? If you don't do it, you're not eligible for federal student loans. You're not eligible to hold a federal job. There's so many things you can't do if you don't register for selective service. You know what? When Drudy and Lyric and Rayleigh and Amaya and Carly turn 18, they don't have to register for selective service. Is that fair? No, it's not. But that's just the way it is. It's going to change, I suspect, because somebody's going to sue if they haven't already. They're going to sue the federal government and say either men should not be required to register for the draft or women should be required to register for the draft. That's right. Because think about it. Women now can serve. The whole reason for that is that in 19 whatever, women could not legally serve in a combat role in the military. And that's changed. That law has changed. Now you have women out pounding the ground. They're infantry officers. They're infantry soldiers. But yet, they're not required to register for the draft. Now, registering, does that mean we're going to draft you? No. But it means if there's a national emergency, we go to war with the Chinese, we might need you. And so, 57-pound Carly will be toting a pack that weighs more than her. I used to teach with a guy who was here that was actually he just did the military and ran bull ring. But he went to Iraq or Afghanistan, can't remember. And he was a big guy. He weighed probably 265, something like that. Big guy. And when he went out on patrol, when he stepped through the gate to go out on patrol, with his body weight and everything he carried, he was about 325. So I'm just picking at you. How much do you weigh? 90?
I don't know.
I'd say 90. Come here, let me heft you. Let me pick you up. About 90 pounds. All right. So Brown versus Board states that separate but equal is never equal. It's inherently unequal. And then finally, Plessy v. Ferguson declared that segregation was legal in the United States. Under what conditions was it legal, and were those conditions ever truly met? How did Brown versus the Board of Education undo or overrule the decision made by the Plessy court? Just 3 quick little bullet points. Segregation was legal under what circumstances? As long as facilities were equal. So, as long as you provided separate facilities and they were equal, segregation was legal. But it never was. Those conditions were never truly met. Black facilities were always inferior to white facilities. And by implication, what did that mean? That meant that black people were inferior to white people. Now, is that true? No. But I'm convinced you tell people something long enough, they'll believe it. Like if you walked in this door and I told you, no, you're stupid. There's no need for you to even try today. You're just stupid. And here we are over 100 days into school. And if I have told you that every day that you've walked in here, you might believe it. And you're really not. But I've told you that, and so you're going to believe it. And so there is a feeling of inferiority that really doesn't begin to turn until people like W.E. Du Bois, John and Eugenia Hope began to work to change things. And then, the civil rights movement begins after World War II. People realize, African Americans realize we're not inferior. We are a talented, intelligent part of America. Okay? All right. And then finally, and I've said this over and over and over, and if you don't put that in your answer, it will be wrong. I don't care how right everything else is. You don't get that last part in, it is wrong. Brown case states that separate but equal is inherently unequal, and it will always be unequal. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? Only 38 questions on your 38 statements that you have to complete on your test. All right. Good deal.